The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold, when the small frontier town gathered at the edge of the clearing. Tied beneath the old oak, a young blonde girl stood trembling, her blue eyes filled with terror. The noose already rested around her neck. She had been condemned, not for stealing or lying, but for daring to carry food to starving Comanche children hiding beyond the hills. The townsfolk called it betrayal. They muttered of savagery and loyalty to their own. The air grew heavier, silence pressing down as the rope tightened above. The sheriff barked the charges, though his voice wavered. Rebecca Lane, guilty of aiding the enemy. For bringing food to Indians, you stand condemned. Some nodded approval, while others shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca's father stood in the back, too ashamed to meet her gaze. Her trembling hands gripped the rope that bound her wrists. She whispered a prayer. Not for herself, but for the hungry faces she had tried to help. A horse snorted impatiently. The executioner placed his hand on the lever. The crowd waited, breathless. Before the lever could fall, a sound pierced the tense stillness, the thunder of hooves. From beyond the hill, a lone rider appeared, silhouetted against the bleeding sunset. His long black hair streamed behind him, a rifle slung across his back. A Comanche warrior rode hard into the clearing, his chest heaving, eyes burning with fury. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sheriff shouted, "Stop him!" But no one moved. The warrior's horse slid to a halt, dust rising around him like smoke from the earth itself. Silence deepened. Rebecca's heart pounded as the warrior dismounted. He carried no pistol in hand, only the fire of his gaze. "She saved my people," he said in broken English, voice rough but strong. "You call her traitor, but to us she is life." The sheriff raised his rifle, but his hands shook. The townsfolk muttered, unsure. For the first time, Rebecca saw not anger in the warrior's eyes, but something else. Recognition, even gratitude. He stepped closer, daring anyone to stop him. The noose swayed above her pale neck. "You'd fight us all for her?" sneered one man, spitting in the dust. The warrior's gaze snapped toward him. "For her, yes," he said simply, drawing a knife from his belt. Gasps rose as the blade flashed in the dimming light. The sheriff motioned for his men, but none advanced. Something in the warrior's stance froze them. Rebecca, choking on her own fear, whispered, "Why?" He met her eyes, fierce yet gentle. "Because only the brave feed the hungry," he answered, slicing the rope that bound her wrists. Her hands dropped free, chaos erupted. Some shouted for blood, others called for mercy. The sheriff cursed, torn between the law and the sudden shift of hearts among the crowd. Rebecca stumbled, falling into the warrior's arms. For a moment all the noise faded. The warrior lifted her easily, as though she weighed nothing at all. "You are not alone," he told her softly. She clung to him, half in shock, half in relief. The sheriff fired a shot into the air to quiet the uproar. Dust drifted. "Choices had to be made. We'll hang them both," snarled a rancher, but no one moved to help him. Rebecca's father finally stepped forward, his weathered face pale with guilt. "She is my daughter," he said, voice breaking. "You'll not hang her again." Murmurs rose among the people. The sheriff's authority crumbled beneath the shifting tide. Some men lowered their rifles. Women clutched their children closer, remembering the faces of the hungry Indian children Rebecca had fed. Doubt crept through the crowd like wildfire, impossible to extinguish now. The warrior stood taller, eyes never leaving Rebecca's. Together they walked toward the edge of the clearing. The sheriff shouted, "Stop! This is against the law!" But his words rang hollow. The people didn't follow. Rebecca's father reached out, brushing her arm. "Go," he whispered. "Find a life where mercy is not a crime." Tears blurred her eyes as she nodded. The warrior mounted his horse, pulling her up behind him. The crowd parted in silence as hooves struck the earth. Dust rose like a curtain, and then they were gone, leaving judgment and rope behind. The ride across the plains was rough, but Rebecca clung tightly to the warrior, the wind tearing through her golden hair. The stars began to emerge, scattered like silver coins across the deepening sky. She whispered, "They'll hunt us." The warrior's voice was steady. "Then let them come. I know the land, and I know freedom." His words carried more certainty than anything she had ever heard. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe there might be a future beyond fear. The world opened wide before them. When they reached the Comanche camp, torches lit the night. Children ran forward, crying with joy at the sight of the woman who had fed them. The elder approached, his weathered face lined with both hardship and wisdom. "This one risked her life for ours," the warrior said. dismounting and helping Rebecca down. The elder nodded slowly, touching her hand. Then she is kin to us now. Rebecca's heart swelled with warmth. For once she was not condemned. She was honored, welcomed into the circle of firelight. Days turned into weeks. Rebecca learned the ways of the camp, the songs, the fire dances, the stories passed down from elders. She found laughter in the children she had once only pitied. The warrior stayed near, teaching her to ride bareback across the plains, to read the signs of wind and animal tracks. At night she would remember the oak tree, the rope, the crowd ready to cheer her death. Then she would look at the faces around her, alive and grateful, and whisper to herself, "I chose right." The sheriff never stopped searching. Word reached the camp of posses combing the hills, of bounties placed on both their heads. The warrior prepared his people to move as they always had, blending into the vastness of the land. Rebecca watched as men packed belongings, women gathered herbs, children carried small bundles. She realized survival itself was rebellion against those who wished them gone. She whispered to the warrior one night, "Do you regret saving me?" He turned to her, eyes steady as stone. "No, you saved me first." Rebecca's heart ached with a strange growing warmth. She remembered the day she had carried bread and dried meat across the hills. Her skirts muddy, her father's words echoing, "They'll kill you if they find out." But hunger had driven her, compassion stronger than fear. She hadn't known that single choice would bind her to a people she barely understood, or to a man whose eyes spoke more than words. Around the fire he would look at her quietly, and though no vows were spoken, something unbreakable was already sealed. When winter came, the snow painted the land white. Rebecca wrapped herself in furs, sitting beside the warrior in the longhouse. Outside, wolves howled in the night. Inside, she told stories of her childhood, of running barefoot through wheat fields, of songs her mother once sang. He listened closely, then shared his own tales, of battles fought, of rivers crossed, of losing kin. They leaned against each other, silence holding them together. In that cold, unforgiving winter, Rebecca found warmth not from the fire, but from the bond she never expected. By spring, the camp was restless. Rumors spread of soldiers moving closer, hunting both Comanche and the girl who had defied her town. Rebecca knew she could return, beg forgiveness, perhaps even live quietly again. Yet the thought chilled her more than any winter. She belonged here now, where love was not bound by law, where compassion was honored, not punished. She stood with the warrior one dawn, watching the sun rise over endless plains. "You gave me life when they tried to take it," she said softly. "Now I live for you." The warrior took her hand, rough and scarred, but warm. "No rope will ever touch you again," he vowed. "Here you are free." Rebecca closed her eyes, breathing the wild air, letting the past fall away. The oak tree was only a memory. The future stretched as wide as the horizon. Together they would face what came, sheriffs, soldiers, or storms. For freedom was theirs, bought not with gold or law, but with courage and love. And in the untamed Wild West, that was the only truth worth living for.